All right, thanks everyone for joining us. We're going to get started here. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspective on Drought and Hydrological Conditions for September of 2020. I am Megan Shargorodsky with the Kentucky Climate Center, and I will be your moderator today. Today we have Dr. Stuart Foster, the director of the Kentucky Climate Center and the state climatologist for Kentucky, leading the main portion of the webinar. We also have Matt Dixon from the University of Kentucky Ag Weather Center, who will be contributing some of the agricultural impacts that we have seen across the state. If you have any questions, please feel free to either type them into the chat box on Zoom or on YouTube, whichever one you're watching, and we'll give you the opportunity to ask your question at the end of the webinar. This month, we have added a live stream and webinar archive to our Kentucky Climate Center YouTube channel. You'll have the opportunity to review any information that you may have missed during the webinar and get additional details. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Stuart Foster, who will get us started.
Thank you, Megan, and welcome everyone to the September webinar. Another rainy day here in Kentucky, and to give a little climatological perspective, if you'll think back 1 year ago, we were entering what became the driest September on record and the second hottest September on record. So a very different situation here in 2020 in climate and many other ways. So again, we appreciate all of our partners with this webinar series and the support of NIDIS and the Midwest Drought Early Warning System and our many partners across the state. We'll be joining you again next month on the 1st of October, Thursday at 1 Central, 2 Eastern time. And with that, we'll go ahead and move into the introduction slide. Well, okay, we've got the Drought and Hydrologic Impact Reporter reminder that if you haven't downloaded that, accessed that, would encourage you to do so. Again, it's been a rather wet summer, so we haven't had a lot of need for application yet, but it's certainly something that we want to really roll out and we'll be emphasizing here down the road a piece. And appreciate the work of Chip Zimmer and the folks there at the Kentucky Division of Water with that. The outline today, again, we'll follow the normal procedure in terms of looking at recent conditions and then take a look at impacts, and again, mainly focused on agriculture. We'll rely on Matt there, and then we'll come back and take a look at the outlooks. Several things that are potentially interesting in terms of factors that could influence us going forward. So on the left, we've just got a couple photos from our Mesonet webcams in Pulaski County and Boone County, and just kind of highlighting the very good conditions that we've had for agriculture across the state that Matt will talk more about later. And in the lower left there in Boone County, that was one of the areas in the state that earlier this summer was showing some dryness, and we were starting to be a little bit concerned, but as you can see, there's very little hint of dry conditions here in the state. We've got our precipitation maps back this month. We did a little bit of work on our scripting there to update a couple things. We take a look at 30-day precipitation totals, numbers in the representing Mesonet observations, and the color shading with the raster image there representing radar estimates of precipitation. So if you look across there at the shading patterns and at the values, you can see precipitation amounts generally in anywhere from 3 inches or a little bit over on the low side. And you can see some of those numbers in the Northeast and down on the southern and the east and southern area. I've got a little bit drier areas indicated there with some lower amounts up along the Ohio River. May actually want to check and make sure those updated correctly on our map this month. But otherwise, values of 4, 5, 6 inches across much of the state, with some amounts Logan County over 9 inches, and Station and Warren County over 8 inches and such. So abundant rainfall across much of the region. But while we're focused on Kentucky, I want you to take a look in the upper left corner at southern Indiana and Illinois, and you can see areas up there that were much, much drier, and we'll come back and talk about that a little bit later. So we'll move on to the 60-day totals. And there we're looking at amounts that are, again, 7, 8 inches in some of the low values over essentially 2 months, up to values that are 11, 12, as much as 14 inches of precipitation. And I think the one thing that stands out here, and we'll see with some of the other maps that we'll look at, and was the case on the first one, is the notion that there's really not much of a trend across the state. It's just pretty consistent pattern across most of the state, interrupted a little bit with some peaks and valleys that you're going to get, especially in the summertime when you've got a lot of pop-up thunderstorms and such. So otherwise, though, if you look east, west, north, south, it's pretty good coverage in terms of precipitation over the 60-day period. And again, a good chunk of that from the last 30 days. And if we go to the 90-day map, really see a continuation of that pattern. Again, amounts in the northeast a little bit lower, 11, 12, 13 inches. If you get farther west, the western half of the state, you've got more values that are in the mid-teens to running over 20 inches of precipitation. In some cases, Grayson County there, and looking over to Ohio County and so forth, some 20-inch total. So again, very abundant rainfall, no exceptionally dry spots across the state anywhere. If we look at that in the context of what's normal for us, here we're looking at just the radar estimates. We don't have exact normals for our mesonet stations. We don't have that much data. But if we look at our 30-day, 60, and 90-day radar estimates percent of normal, the light shaded blue are areas that are 150 to 200% of normal, and the dark purple is 200 to 300% of normal. And those two colors are pretty dominant across the maps, especially the 30 and 60-day maps. And again, there are some small pockets where it has been drier, but even the dry areas are right around normal in terms of precipitation totals, just a few percentage points above or below. So again, very abundant rainfall, really helped out by the rains over the last 30 days that have eased some of the dryness that we saw earlier this summer, where we did have some D0, D1 drought creeping into the state. Again, notice though, in the 30-day totals, if you go to the northwest up into Indiana and Illinois, those are areas that have been extremely dry. And on a national scale, there's been much concern about drought, particularly bullseyed in on the state of Iowa, but that has now expanded a bit across a tier that runs eastward from there. So we've been very wet, but there are some areas not too far from Kentucky where that has not been the case this summer. Put this into context a little bit. This is a table from the Midwestern Regional Climate Center that shows monthly precipitation totals for 2019 and 2020 year to date, along with the climate normals from the National Centers for Environmental Information. And you can see that for 2020, we don't have the official number for August, but we plugged in the average statewide precipitation based on the Kentucky Mesonet, and assuming that that will be pretty close to what the NCEI number will be. And so put that 4.7 and add that to the total gives us a little over 43, or let's just say around 43 inches average statewide. And if you look at the below there, the annual average for the entire year, it's just under 48 inches. So we're getting pretty close there, and we're off to a wet start here in September. Statewide, we've probably averaged about 1.5 inches of rain across the state through the first 2 or 3 days here of the month. So we're almost, even though we're not yet through the month of September, have not even entered the fall season, we're getting very, very close to our annual average total precipitation. Another thing you'll note is that going back to last September, again, 0.22 of an inch of precipitation average all over the state. Every single month since September, we have been above normal precipitation-wise across the state. Another thing that stands out as we look at this year, and again, I probably should have included some other years in the table, but while we're running above normal every single month, we don't have any one month in particular that stands out with 9, 10, 11 inches of precipitation. And that sort of thing does happen here in Kentucky. And you can see in 2019 where we had February that averaged over 9 inches and June over 8 inches. So this year it's just been very steadily, consistently wet throughout the year. There again were some areas to the in the bluegrass region that did start to get dry earlier this summer, but it either was very localized or did not persist. So looking there at the bottom of some of those bullets, it's worth noting that 3 of the 5 wettest years in Kentucky have occurred in the past decade. And the wettest year was 2011 at 64.35 inches of precipitation. So we are tracking at this point, if we were just to extrapolate where we are now and carry that to the end of the year, we would be right on that number about. So we are tracking at a level that could set a new record for precipitation across the state. And even if it dries out, we are very much on track to again rank within the top 10 wettest years on record going back to 1895. So that's 125 years. So an extremely wet period in terms of Kentucky's climate that really does suggest that from a hydrologic perspective, we're seeing some fundamental changes in climate here. Just too many wet years within the last few decades. Now moving on to temperatures. On the left, we're looking at average deviation of daily high temperatures from the long-term mean. And we're looking at the entire Midwest region. You can see Kentucky there where we've been running cooler than normal in terms of our high temperatures. Again, we've had a relatively large number of cloudy days, a lot of precipitation days, a lot of humidity in the environment. The areas that have been dry, we talked about drought in Iowa and moving eastward from there. And you can see those areas to our north have been running warmer than normal. So dry soils, dry environment, higher maximum temperatures, wet environment like we have here, those temperatures tend to be depressed. On the right side, we're looking at the average low temperatures in departure from the long-term mean. And there we've been running either around average to a little bit above average temperature-wise. And again, that's consistent with being wetter than normal and more cloud cover, more moisture in the atmosphere. That moisture in the atmosphere and the soil buffers the extremes of our temperature. Soil moisture, generally either near to mostly above normal across the state in terms of percentile rankings. And again, you can see that as you go farther north into the Midwest, that's not the case. So we're in an area that extends down to Alabama, over Mississippi, Arkansas. with above normal soil moisture. A lot of flow moisture coming up out of the Gulf, fueling thunderstorms and the precipitation we've been receiving throughout the region. And then on the right, if we look at a more general indicator of groundwater, again, lots of blue on there, indicating that for the most part, we're running above normal in terms of shallow groundwater. So again, a couple complementary indicators. They should show roughly the same thing, and for the most part, they do. Now, if we look at some of our Kentucky Mesonet stations for soil moisture, you may notice we've got some new graphs this month. We updated our website, released a new version, and it has some new graphics in it. So we're looking at Henderson County in the upper left, Boone County in the upper right. So we'll go along the Ohio River toward the west, and then up across from the Cincinnati metropolitan area, or part of that. And then on the lower left, Trigg County down along the Tennessee border in western Kentucky, and Breathitt County in eastern Kentucky. Key thing to look at there, again, you've seen these before. The yellow is the 40-inch moisture. The gray and kind of blue and silver colors are the nearer to the surface 2, 4, 8-inch moisture levels. Key thing is that going back 6 months, they dropped off a little bit as we got into the summer, but they have held up remarkably well, especially compared to what we saw happening last year about this time. So soil moisture, in spite of going through the summer season, has really looked strong here in Kentucky. And again, very much consistent with the previous slide. The EDDI, Evaporative Demand Drought Index, measuring the atmospheric thirst for water. Again, lower high temperatures, more humidity, more cloud cover. So on the left, we're looking at the 1 week measure. On the right, we're looking at it averaged over an entire month, the most recent maps available. And you can see in both cases, we're either near normal to below normal. A little bit on the 7-day, 1 week in eastern Kentucky, where it's a little above normal, a little warmer conditions there until just recently. But again, those values are very comfortable for us and help to explain why soil moisture is held in so strongly here this summer. Again, you'll notice if you go to the north, the areas had drought, that the EDDI is much higher there. And again, Iowa suffering from drought and also hit by the derecho that did a lot of damage to crops in areas where those storms went through. So we've been very fortunate here in terms of the atmospheric climatic conditions for agriculture and water supplies here in the state. 7-day average stream flow running either from normal to above normal to much above normal across much of the state, including rivers in eastern Kentucky, the Licking and Kentucky rivers, but also in parts of western Kentucky. So again, we've had rainfall that's been abundant across pretty much the entire state, and that's showing up in terms of our 7-day stream flows. And when we look at our 28-day average, so basically the whole month, really see a very similar pattern on that next slide. So again, some near normal to above to much above normal across the state. And again, this time of year, we're just not accustomed necessarily to, certainly don't expect that to be the case. Current flooding, really nothing to talk about. So we've got higher stream flows, but no major flooding issues across the state. And again, not really expecting that to be the case this time of year. And again, that's even in the face of rains that came through from Hurricane Laura, the remnants of that system. So they produced good rains across much of the state, but not leading to flooding conditions. Now move on to the drought monitor, and fortunately, there's nothing to talk about here in Kentucky this month, and that map is showing a lot more color to it than it was a year ago. We had been going for an extended period with very little drought anywhere in the country, but we are definitely on an upswing as we look nationwide in terms of the percentage of the country's area that is in some state of drought. While the focus is mainly on the West here in terms of large area and extreme drought conditions that have developed and are likely to persist for a period of time. So we've had heat waves in the West, very warm conditions contributing to wildfires. And so those conditions are likely to persist going forward. And we also see some drought we talked about in Iowa that has spread across portions of the Midwest. And while we don't usually talk too much about drought in the New England states and the Northeast, we see some areas that have become quite dry when we get in New England states and down to even to Pennsylvania. And we've got some dryness just north of us in Ohio. So again, we're very, very fortunate at this point that we're not dealing with those types of drought conditions, and the lack of color on the map in the Southeast, again, consistent with that flow of moisture and that abundant precipitation that we've seen. So change in drought conditions, you've got some green shading in the east, and that's reflecting improvements in drought conditions over the last month. And otherwise, you see some of the areas where drought is more intense or extreme. Those areas generally have been getting worse out into the West and through parts of the Midwest, not too far from us, and then up in the New England states. So the areas that were in drought, generally seeing that drought intensifying, with the exception of areas that are closer to Kentucky where things have been improving. So moving on to impacts. So we've looked at current conditions. They're pretty benign for us. That shows up also in terms of storm impacts over the last 30 days. It was a relatively calm month, and the reports were mainly associated with thunderstorms, heavy rainfall that produced localized flooding, flash flooding, very short in duration for the most part, or damaging winds. So several reports of trees down, which is not unusual, knocking out power in places, but really very few situations where we had reports of trees being blown over or winds causing damage to private property. A couple of cases where we had roofs damaged or a tree fell on a porch or a car, but again, very, very isolated, no widespread events across the state over the last month. So again, a pretty benign month in terms of storm impacts. And Megan, with that, I'll send it back to you, and we can go up to Lexington and hear what Matt's got to say.
Okay, great. Thanks, Stu. Now I'll bring on Matt Dixon with the UK Ag Weather Center.
Thanks, guys. I feel like I should be knocking on wood a little bit whenever I say this. Can you guys hear me all right? Sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. But everything continues to look pretty good here for Kentucky Ag. Stu talked about it earlier in the fact that we've been fortunate here in Kentucky. We've gotten some extra rain over the past couple of months. We can handle that here in the summer, maybe not so over the winter months, but we've also avoided those major events such as that derecho that Stu talked about in Iowa. Looking at where we're at right now in the crop table at the top, producers have started to cut tobacco, and we even have some producers starting to harvest corn. It's only a very small percentage at 2% right now. Saying that, 37% of corn is now considered mature, which is slightly below normal compared to that 5-year average. So we're definitely heading toward full swing and harvest pretty soon. Beans are also starting to progress through those later stages of development also. So looking to the right there at crop conditions, we continue to stay with that same trend of most of the crops in the good to excellent categories. This has been the trend the past couple of months we've talked. 87% of corn now is in that good to excellent category, while beans are at 84%. Hay harvested quality sits at 71% between those two categories. So all pretty high percentages right now. I'll talk a little bit more about this subject in the next two slides, but looking below, I took some pictures while I went out to UK Woodford County Farm yesterday. All the rain we've had, I took a picture on the right of some of the pastures just to illustrate how green everything still is. Typically right now, we're heading into our driest time of the year, September, October, and things usually maybe start turning a little bit brown, but that hasn't been the case this year. It's definitely good to see, and it's quite the 180-degree turn from last September and our driest September on record. I know looking back at 2019, September, we only averaged 0.22 inches last year for the entire month. And I think most people have seen that at least over the first few days of September in 2020. So something good to see. And at this time last year with that drought, we were feeding winter hay early. Pastures were turning brown. Late cutting yields were also down. So overall, a lot of negatives. And it's definitely been a change in scenery this year. I took a couple pictures of barns already full there at Woodford County Farm, and now farmers are looking forward to putting a little bit more away for the winter months. And then maybe that's one less thing on the producer's mind this winter to worry about. So something good to see. Extra rain also opens up the option to stockpile for winter grazing. Talking with some forage specialists in the college, the remnants of Hurricane Laura moving through the region gave producers a great opportunity to put some nitrogen down on fall pastures to increase that pasture growth and reduce those late fall, early winter season feed costs. So something else that I consider good to see is outlooks do hit at higher confidence and above normal rainfall for the first half of September. So there is still time if you missed out putting anything down before that hurricane and this wet week we've just had. There still is a good opportunity to put some fertilizer down in the weeks ahead. So next slide, please. So while I keep talking about how good the condition of crops are looking, I think it's great to see how well we are looking compared to recent years. I have three graphs here from the National Agricultural Statistics Service. Shows the percentage of a particular crop in the good to excellent category throughout the growing season for the state of Kentucky. I got corn at the top, beans in the middle, and then pasture at the bottom. And you can see 2020 is the red line for all the graphs. And we see lines going back to 2016 purple, 17 blue, green 18, and yellow and 19. But starting about the third week of July and continuing through the present, you can see the 2020 percentage is well above anything we've seen at this point over the past 5 years. Like I said earlier, corn sits at 87% right now, and it was under 70% at the same time last year. Beans the same way. And then looking down at the bottom, 2020 is hovering near the top with the years of 16, 17, 18. We're looking at pastures. So you can see 2019 in the orange line, yellow line that took that steep drop in September last year with the drought in place. So overall, we are looking very good compared to recent years. But let's take a look at surrounding states now. So next slide, please. All right, so just to close, before I get started on this slide, I want to give a shout out to a relatively new podcast here in Kentucky. I think it started up in early spring, but it's called Dirt to Dollars. It's hosted by 3 county extension agents in central Kentucky, Matt Adams in Hardin County, Daniel Carpenter in LaRue, and Whitney Carmen in Grayson County. If you get a chance, check it out. They put together a great show focusing on different ag topics each week. But I wanted to say I was listening to it a couple of weeks ago, and while Kentucky crop conditions look fantastic right now, Matt Adams, he pointed out the fact that we are near the top across the nation. So I pulled up the, excuse me, I pulled up the following two graphics from the National Crop Report as of the last update this past Monday. I believe it was August 31st. We're looking at crop conditions for each state across the nation, and I have Kentucky highlighted in red. Again, we are at 87% in the good to excellent categories. Doing a little math and looking at states around us, Indiana sits at 63%, Illinois at 70, Tennessee at 71, Ohio at 45 in those same categories. So we're in pretty good shape compared to those states close to us. And in fact, I looked at all the states on this chart, and Kentucky is leading the way in that good, excellent category. So something good to see. But looking below at beans, I won't go too much into it, but it's more of the same story. 84% in that good to excellent category here in Kentucky. And again, that's the top spot across the nation. So overall, looking at everything, we are looking pretty good in Kentucky agriculture right now. So that's what I have. Now we look forward to harvest 2020. So I'll send it back to you, Stu.
Thanks, Matt. And hopefully we can keep those very positive ag reports coming. But looking forward, again, we've got several things going on here that can affect our outlook. So one is, as probably aware, it's been an active hurricane season already. And last month, the National Hurricane Center came out with a seasonal outlook update, indicating that, again, not only had we been above normal in terms of the number of storms early on, but that has continued since. And the expectation is that we're likely to be above normal for the year. Again, we're pacing well above normal. Conditions in the Atlantic, very favorable, very warm waters in the Gulf. And that's important to us. We just saw an example with Hurricane Laura that brought rainfall to the state. And many of the hurricanes that form don't make landfall, and many of the ones that do don't necessarily impact Kentucky, but some of them do, as we've seen. So we just need to be aware, precipitation-wise, that we have something of an enhanced likelihood of these types of systems affecting us. And we know from past experience that if they do, they can bring very heavy rainfall to the state. So again, probably not as critical this summer as wet as it's been, but something to keep an eye on. So with that in mind, the 7-day quantitative precipitation forecast, you can see a projected river or area of heavy precip to our west, going through the plains and upper Midwest, and looks like perhaps Iowa will get some much needed rain. But really over the next 7 days, once this system gets out of here, we're likely to dry out for a few days with just some minor precipitation totals expected over the next 7 days, but that may change going forward, as we'll see here with the next slides. 6 to 10 day outlook. The atmospheric models are showing a pretty sharp pattern of ridging and troughs in the pattern. So very much a roller coaster type of situation, and a ridge that's affecting the West Coast and a little bit of Alaska. And then next to that ridge, a trough that's expected to bring some cooler than normal Canadian air into the central US and affecting Kentucky. And with that, then the positioning of the storm track and moisture out of the Gulf, we're also likely to be above normal or have an enhanced likelihood of above normal precipitation over the 6 to 10 days. But again, we saw that 7-day outlook was fairly dry. So we anticipate that would be more toward the end of that period, again, the 6 to 10 days. So if we go to the next one, the 8 to 14 day outlook, pretty similar. That trough pattern is likely to be pretty strong and persist. So we really, again, just a sharp contrast to last September. It looks like this September is going to start out much cooler than we were last year, and good likelihood of being cooler than normal over the first half of September. That likelihood of above normal precipitation is still there in the 8 to 14 day outlook. It's not quite as strong, and there's a larger area as that trough sets in of below normal precipitation through much of the plains during that period. So that precipitation outlook changes a bit, while the temperature outlook is pretty consistent over both the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlooks. A monthly outlook then really captures the effect of the early cool weather starting for the month. And that's likely to be the main story for the entire month of September. And with that, Kentucky is either in the equal chances to slightly enhanced likelihood of below normal temperatures for us. We'll look at some of our crops getting ready for harvest. The lower temperatures will not necessarily speed that along per se, but as Matt said, we're in pretty good shape there. In terms of precipitation, September outlook, again, reflecting the first couple months or first couple weeks, all in all, likely to be a slight likelihood of above normal precipitation. Again, we've been above normal every single month since last September. So this would suggest that there's a reasonable likelihood of that continuing, and we're certainly off to a good start so far here in September. So another thing to keep an eye on is La Nina. So we have actually been in a La Nina watch for a little while, but really don't tend to pay a whole lot of attention to that until we get into the fall season, because its impacts are largely through the winter months here in Kentucky, at least in predictable impacts. So these are some graphics from Columbia University. And in the upper left, you can look at a map. It's a global map, but you can focus in there on the United States in the upper right. And the projected impacts of La Nina, which is associated with colder than normal near surface sea temperatures in the central Pacific. And that tends to affect convection and thunderstorm development, pushing it farther west and toward Asia area to Australia and Southeast Asia. But for us, it tends to lead to drier conditions across the southern tier of the country, but a little bit of a bullseye right in the Ohio River Valley, where it usually indicates wetter than normal conditions, at least on average. So when we hear La Nina, that's the signal that we think about here in Kentucky. The likelihood of the La Nina forming, this is the forecast that was issued in early August. It has not yet been updated, but at that time was indicating about a 60% chance of La Nina developing here in the fall season, and then a 55% chance of that continuing through the winter season. So you can see the blue bars rising up there at about 60% in the October, November, December period, and likewise a relatively strong chance of it continuing to be neutral, but nonetheless the odds favoring La Nina development. So the next slide kind of shows a little bit about what that means for us here in Kentucky historically in terms of precipitation. So what you're looking at here is a set of plots, one for each a 3-month window So DJF, December, January, February, and then January, February, March. So we just drop 1 month off the end and add a new month on, going throughout the year in 3-month windows that overlap. And on the horizontal axis is the Oceanic Nino Index. The blue shaded area on the graph are La Nina conditions. The pink or reddish shaded areas are El Nino conditions, and the gray is a neutral condition. So we're currently neutral, expecting to go to the blue, to La Nina. And again, here we're looking at, if we look on the bottom row, you'd be looking at September, October, November period going forward. And you can see that La Nina, both La Nina and El Nino, the median, the dark line, the dark blue, dark red, and black are the median, or half of the years with La Nina were wetter than that, half the years were drier than that. And likewise for the other colors. And then the individual year, these are years since 1950. So every year since 1950, plotted on there on the vertical axis is showing the 3-month precipitation total. So the higher the bar, the wetter it is. And again, you can see the individual years going across there. Again, most of our impacts tend to be in the winter. So December, January, February, March, you can see that during La Ninas, we do tend to be wetter. But there are a couple things to point out. One is that if you look within those La Nina values or any of the other colors, there's quite a bit of variability. So the fact that the median level shows us likely to be wetter than normal, there were many years where that was not the case. But again, also many years where it was the case. The other thing to point out here is that if you look at the, again, the blue side of the graphs for December, January, February, and the next one, and even into March, you can see that while the likelihood of an extremely wet season is very low, it's elevated when we're in a La Nina situation. And when we get into an El Nino circulation, especially a strong El Nino, which is not the case right now, we have never had an extremely wet season. In fact, that signal is pretty consistently dry. But La Nina means that it could be very wet, but normally it's just a bit wetter than normal, sometimes not at all. So that's a little bit of information about how to read into that. And if we continue to see that La Nina situation evolving, we'll probably put this graph back up as a reminder of what we might expect going forward. So having said that, we'll look at the September, October, November outlooks. Temperature-wise, an enhanced likelihood of above normal temperatures all across the nation and in Alaska. So a pretty strong indicator that we should be warmer than normal going into the fall season. A little less likelihood of that in parts of Kentucky, but overall a pretty strong signal. And then precipitation-wise, equal chances of above, below, or near normal precipitation. So no real guidance as to whether the wet conditions are likely to continue. But the areas that are currently in drought to our west and to the south, southwest and such, likely to see conditions continuing to deteriorate there. And we pay attention to that because in the long term, that could affect us perhaps next year if those conditions continue. So monthly stream flow outlook from our friends at the Ohio River Forecast Center. We saw earlier above normal stream flows that we've had over the last week and month. We're likely to continue to see normal to above normal stream flows for the month of September. And flood outlook, there is some risk with all the rain we've had of some minor flooding, probably more on the short term than the long term actually, for parts of the Green River, but again, a minor risk. and the flooding would be minor in nature. And then wildland fire potential around normal, with a below normal likelihoods to our south, and certainly much above as we move out to the west. But again, not surprisingly, not a lot of concern at this point about wildland fire potential. So summarizing all of that, precipitation totals have been above to significantly above normal pretty much all across the state over the last month, and up to 90 days, with the last month having a lot to do with that. Soil moisture and groundwater levels near to above normal across the state. Very favorable conditions for agriculture, municipal water supplies, no issues, concerns there. We haven't heard anything about harmful algae blooms this summer. The conditions just have not been favorable for that at all. And then looking ahead, an enhanced likelihood of conditions being cooler and wetter than normal in September. And in the face of an active hurricane season and possible La Nina, seasonal outlook into fall indicates slightly enhanced likelihood of warmer and normal temperatures, equal chances on precipitation. So with that, I'll send it back to you, Megan, and if anyone has questions for Matt or myself, or Chip and Bill, I think Chip's on the call, we'll be happy to take those.
Thanks, Stu and Matt. Now we'll move on to the question and discussion section. And I'll give just a moment for the YouTube live stream to catch up, but I welcome any of you to either unmute your mic, raise your hand, however you want to designate that you have a question. And I'm going to keep an eye on the YouTube live stream as well. So we'll just give just a minute, and feel free to ask a question if you have one. Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, this question is actually probably for Stu. I was just wondering what your opinion is on the use of the 30 years, updating every 10 years as far as our normals. And I'm wondering if you feel that that is still a good representation to go by, or if you think, if you had your way, do you think it should be maybe 10 years or 15 years and it should update maybe every 5 years? I was just wondering what your thoughts on that would be.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ron. And there's been a lot of conversation within the climate community about that, and that actually some research done over the years to try to really kind of look at data and see what makes the most sense. And one thing I'll say is that what makes the most sense can differ depending on where you are and changes in climate. So I can't necessarily give a definitive answer, but what I'll say is that we're certainly seeing, especially on the precipitation side, we're seeing some very notable changes in terms of our precipitation patterns here in Kentucky. And when the new normals are released, I expect that we will see about a 5% increase thereabouts in what's considered normal precipitation when they come out with the 1991 to 2020 normals. And that's, if you think about that over just 10 years, that's a pretty significant increase. So again, I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but it should be somewhere in that ballpark. So the fact that that would happen does suggest that a 30-year window that's only updated every 10 years, you could argue that that's obsolete when your climate is changing as rapidly as what ours appears to be in terms of precipitation based on what the data are showing. So I think probably the best answer to that is that I think you're starting to see instead of just a single climate normal product, going forward is more likely that there could be products that are a 30-year product, a 20-year product, and so forth, because different users might have different needs in terms of how quickly they need to respond to conditions in terms of what might be normal. That's a great question, though.
Thank you.
All right, Ron, thanks for the question, and Stu, thanks for the answer. Any other questions out there? All right, with that, we will go ahead and wrap up the webinar. The next regularly scheduled webinar is Thursday, October 1st at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central. And if you want to provide any feedback, feel free to get in touch with Stu Foster, Matt Dixon, Bill Caldwell, or Chip Zimmer. Their contact information is listed here. You should be able to reference the YouTube slide or the YouTube live stream once that's finished up. And I'll also email it out as well. We also have the Kentucky Drought and Hydrologic Impact Reporter that you can feel free to explore on your own. And those links are listed there too. So thank you everyone for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Have a good day.